Hello and welcome to the first Django Ninja tutorial on this channel. So in this tutorial, we're going to take an existing project and we're going to integrate Django Ninja. If you haven't come across Django Ninja, it is a Django Rest framework. So similar to DRF in the same kind of principles there, the Rest framework. So this is going to be utilized for us to build some API endpoints so that we can generate or build an API application to serve data to a front end. So because this is the first tutorial, this is kind of a beginner's tutorial, we are going to go through the basics of integrating this into an existing application. We'll go through the basic setup, but we're going to be utilizing an existing project, and it does have this fairly comprehensive set of tables. So I will be giving you all the code for the kind of back-end application so that we can integrate Django Ninja into that application. But if you're interested in actually just building that application from scratch, if you go over to the main channel here, and then in the playlists, you're going to find a playlist for the e-commerce project version 2. And the base code that I'm going to be providing for this introduction to Django Ninja is from here. There's a kind of a summary of everything we've done up to this point in this tutorial here. I think it's tutorial 7 here. But if you're interested in how I came about developing that database schema, go ahead and have a look at the first tutorial. So there is a little bit of setup here with this tutorial before we start. Now I did leave a README file here, which is going to take you through a general process on Windows or Mac, how to get the project started so we can start then integrating Django Ninja into our project. So if you're on Windows or Mac, just follow the guide here. If you're familiar with using virtual machines or virtual environments, then that's all good. There is a step here where we are going to be utilizing some fixtures. So fixtures is just data that we're going to insert into the database. So I have made a load of fixtures with over 200,000 rows. So you're going to need to download it here and then just follow the guide here. You need to put that fixtures folder into the e-commerce demo folder. I'll show you that shortly, but you're going to need to download those fixtures to get data into the database. And then you can use the management command that I created in the project, demo fixtures, to then actually load that up. Now that will take some time to load. It's 200,000 rows. And there may be some warnings that appear. Just ignore them, let it run. It's going to take 2 or 3 minutes to load that in. So in addition to that, before you start, you are going to need Docker here. So if you don't have Docker installed, there's no point starting this if you're not interested in installing Docker. You will need Docker to get this working because the project requires a Postgres database, and it also has Elasticsearch also in the project already. Although we won't be utilizing Elasticsearch, it's just how it's all set up. So to summarize then, so by the end of this tutorial, you would have integrated Django Ninja Rest Framework into an existing project. That's kind of the goal here. And then inside of this tutorial, we'll go ahead and install and integrate Django Ninja. We'll go through kind of URLs, and then we'll look at building some endpoints. So this tutorial will only focus on kind of get function. So we'll only be getting data from the database, but we will specifically look at how to set up Django Ninja so that we can work with foreign keys, reverse keys, many-to-many relationships in our table, and also working with images. So you're going to find a link in the video description where you can download part 7 or the previous code or the base code needed for this tutorial. In addition to that, if you follow the guidelines, there is also actually a link in the video description for the fixtures. Yeah, so both the fixtures link and the base code for this tutorial is a link in the video description. So what you're going to find once you've kind of extracted that to a folder here and opened it up, here we are in Visual Studio Code. This is what it's going to look like, the main project. And then inside of e-commerce demo, just put the fixtures folder right there and all the fixtures should be in place. So that's the setup. And now we're ready to actually get this started. So like I said, you are going to need Docker for this. So go ahead and download Docker if you haven't already done so. So let's get our containers running. So we do have 2 containers that will be started. So we've got a database here, a Postgres database, and Elasticsearch. So this is already set up for you. If you are interested in how to set this up, again, just watch the previous tutorial. I'll go through that step by step. So first up then, we need a virtual environment. Again, look at the README file. That'll take you through the process. Here I'm on Mac, so I need to type in Python. What do I need to do? Oh yeah, virtual env. If you're on Windows, you're just going to type in py -m venv. So it's in the setup guide. So I'm going to do that, then venv. That's going to create my virtual environment folder, and then I just need to go into that folder. So I'll go ahead and do that by typing in on the Mac at least, venv, and then bin, and then activate. So now we've got that in place. In order to get this project started, we have to install all these different dependencies here. So let's go ahead and pip install, and then we're going to then say -r for, I think that's for requirements, and then we're going to install the requirements. So that's going to go ahead and install all of these packages that are needed to get this project started. So we are going to be utilizing Django Ninja. So let's also pip install Django Ninja. Let's do that. So that gets Django Ninja installed and installs all the other things it needs. And then we go ahead and we'll just pip freeze. So we'll just update this requirements list and then specify the requirement list. So that's just going to update this list, and it should now have Django Ninja. Right, so that's that sorted. So what we can now do is go into e-commerce, and we can register Django Ninja if we wanted to, just by typing in Ninja here. So that's in the installed apps. So you don't need to do that. If you read the documentation, it suggests that it says there are some performance reasons why you can do that, but that's not mandatory. And then we're also then going to build a new folder here called D Ninja. So I don't know why that is there actually. So let's just get rid of that. So first of all, I'll go into my settings and I'll just add into the installed apps ecommerce.dninja. Now we don't need to build a new app here. We can just make a new folder. I've called this D Ninja. And then inside of here, let's just put an init file there. And then essentially we need 3 files here. So you can call this whatever you like, but I'm going to call this api.py. So that's going to have, or in here, we're going to type in all kind of the endpoints and all of that logic inside of this file here. Then the second file we're going to create is urls.py. So I'm just going to extend the URLs and just logically place all the URLs for Django Ninja inside of this file. So I'm just going to take it away from the main URL file here just to logically bring that into this project folder. And then at the same time, we now need a schema. So think of schemas at the moment as the same. If you're familiar to Django DRF, just think of them at this point as serializers, for example. So here we're going to be talking about schemas. Django DRF, for example, if you're familiar with that, we would be talking about serializers. All right, so we need 3 files. That's pretty much all we need at this point. So we've registered the application. We've then gone ahead and created these 3 files. So let's just get the basic workflow sorted before we move any further. So what we're going to need to do now is just make sure that we have got all of our Docker aspects up. So Docker compose, and then we can say up, and then we use a D flag so we don't then show the terminals of the containers. So that should bring everything up. Happy days. So inside of Docker now, if we go into a dashboard, we now have our 2 containers running. That's all good. So next thing is we need to then load up. All of the database with some data. So that's where our fixtures come into play. So I've created some management commands if you're not familiar with that. We've created our own management commands here. One's called demo fixtures, one called demo docker. So this allows us to create predefined commands that we want to run. So here's a series of commands: make migrations, migrate, and then load all the fixtures. So what I can do here is I can use manage.py, and then, for example, now the actual command is the name of this file. So I say demo-fixtures, and then that will then load all of these commands or run these commands. At least it should do. There we go. So you can see that there's a warning here due to zone support. Don't worry about that. That's just a warning. But what's happening now, if I move up, you can see that the fixtures are starting to be installed into the database. And because there's so many, that might take a minute. So when I say a minute, that could be around about 5 to 10 minutes to load all that data into your Docker container Postgres database. So just give it a couple of minutes, go and have a cup of tea or something, and then we'll start building. So mine is still going after around about 5 minutes. So we're just going to press ahead. We can obviously just build or create another terminal here, so we can just crack on, and this will carry on loading all the data in. Now it's just kind of dawned upon me that really I should make a smaller set of data, and I may have already done that in actual fact. So you can ignore this completely. So I may go ahead and just make a smaller set of data, smaller set of fixtures, because there's no benefit of having such a large set of fixtures here. So let's just press on. Let's press on. Right. So next up then, we have a set of URLs, but let's just understand what we're doing here first. So there is a link in the description that takes you to this schema here. So you can see the database that we're working with. And this is really the base of this project. This is the most important aspect of our project. This is where our data is going to be stored. This is where we're going to need to get the data from when a front end requests that data through our Django Ninja Rest Framework. So have a little look at that. Get a little bit familiar with that. And then in addition to that, this is what we're trying to achieve here. So we're just kind of mocking up this idea that this API is going to be part of a product inventory system. We have a home page. On that home page, we have 3 kind of features. So we have a category drop-down list, which will then allow the user to select a category and go to a product by category page. So it's going to show all the products by category on that page. And then someone can then click on one of those products and that will take you to the single product. That's the general idea. And so what we're going to do here with Django Ninja is we're going to replace the existing DRF system, the Django Rest Framework API from this application. We're going to replace it with this new Django Ninja Rest Framework API. So this is where we're focusing on. So we're going to create 3 endpoints. One endpoint where we can grab all the category information, one endpoint where we can grab products by category, and then the single product. So we're going to go into the inventory table and get all the products associated with that single product. If you are new to this series, just to kind of clarify that a little bit, you can see here we've got a product table. So this product table holds, for example, a Nike shoe. Okay, so that's the product. Now that Nike shoe, we may have multiple versions of it, different sizes, different colors. So that's what's going to be stored here in this product inventory table. Every single version, every single color or size is going to have a new record inside of this product inventory table. So whenever we go to a product page, we're going to need to grab all this information here. So like when you go to an e-commerce store, you can click on the buttons, you can look at the red one, the blue one. It may have different prices, there might be different options, there might be different descriptions, and that's basically all that information is going to come from this product inventory table. So the last endpoint we need to build here is that we're going to get all those inventory products related to that single product, and then obviously prepare that data ready to go onto the single product page. So that single product page will then have access to or be able to show all the individual different types of that particular shoe or whatever it is about that product. So that's going to allow us to really embed some of the important skills that we need to understand in order for us to work with Django Ninja. We're going to need to know how to, for example, collect all this other data that's connected to the product inventory table. So you can see that we already have the DRF implementation here to help us out, understand what we're doing. If we go into the URLs, we can see here that we have an endpoint here for search. We ignore that. We have an endpoint here for inventory. That's going to give us the product inventory or the single product page. This is the API endpoint for that. We have an endpoint here for category by category name. So we get all the products by category name. And then DRF version of getting all the categories. So it's these 3 endpoints that we're going to recreate using Django Ninja. So what I'm doing here, like we saw earlier in our Django Ninja folder, we created a new URLs file. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to extend these URLs to now look also inside of these URLs too, but we're just going to put this locally within this Django Ninja folder so that we can keep it within this application here or associate it to this application. So we're going to say path, and then we create a new path. So that's going to be Ninja. So that's kind of the entry point, if you like, into the Ninja URLs. And then we just need to point this to the Ninja URL. So we're going to say include, and then ecommerce.dninja folder, and then there's a file called URLs. Okay, so that just basically points Django to the URLs over here, so we can extend these URLs from this file here. So ecommerce.d, yeah, that's right. Okay, so we're going to need to just include, bring that tool in so we can use include here, and that's pretty much all we need there at that point. So that isn't needed. Put it right here. Yep. Okay, so now we can go ahead and just close that. Let's go into our Django Ninja folder, and we're just going to set up our URLs here in our Django Ninja folder. So what we're going to need here is, well, from Django. Let's just zoom in a little bit. So from Django .urls, of course, let's import path. So we're just going to set up that, and we're also going to need from ecommerce, yep, we're going to need the API that we're going to need to set up shortly. So we'll do that, .api import API. Okay, so that makes sense in a minute. And then we're going to need some URL patterns. So let's create our first URL pattern, which is going to be blank. And then we're going to point that to api.urls. So essentially what we're doing here is we're pointing this to something called API, which is the main Django Ninja implementation, if you like. And then from that, we can then grab all the URLs, and then that will make all the URLs that are going to be needed for this project. Essentially what we're doing here is we're just registering then all the URLs that we're going to create, but we're going to create all the URLs inside of our API file. And you'll see that shortly in a minute. So blank here. So if you remember in the URLs here, we set up this endpoint here. Let's bring this in a bit. We set up this endpoint here, Ninja. So if I want to access any of the Ninja URLs, I need to do that first of all by typing in Ninja. And then this is blank, so nothing else is needed. And then whatever URLs that we set up shortly. Okay, so that's the URLs all set up. So let's just close that. And now we can get on to actually building our first endpoint. Right, so what we're going to need to do here then is we need to bring in the main Ninja API. So let's do that. So from, oh God, I can't find the F and the R. From Ninja, let's import Ninja API. So this is the main kind of implementation of Ninja where we can access all the different resources, etc. Then we're going to say API equals Ninja API. So that gives us then access to all the different tools, etc. And then we just extend from API. So you can see back in our URLs here, we're saying import API, which is the main implementation of Ninja API, yep. And then grab the URLs that is kind of created. Okay, so now we have that in place. This is really simple, as it kind of touts on the website. It's really easy and simple to build. We're going to create a decorator here. So we're going to say @API, and then we need to specify what kind of function we want to perform. So we want to get some data, so get, and then just following the tutorial here that you'll find on the tutorial, on the Ninja tutorial page. Let's go ahead and make an endpoint called /hello. Okay, so that essentially is registering a new endpoint in our system. And then what we can then do is create a function here. Let's just call this hello. And then we take in the request, and then we just need to return something. So we're going to turn the classic hello world. Okay, so that's really the basics here of creating a GET request or dealing with a GET request to this endpoint here. So what's going to happen is we're going to, from the front end, send a request to ninja/hello, and that's going to be a GET request. If it is a GET request, we're then going to perform this function here, which is just saying hello world. We need no W there. Okay, so that's pretty much it, really, the basics of this. So we can now go ahead and run our server. Let's just make sure. So all the fixtures are now been added. So I can actually just get rid of that. So let's go ahead and just run this and see if it works. Manage.py run server. It looks like we've got one missing requirement. Looks like something is wrong here. So line 5 of API. So API.get. Okay, so I can see the problem here. We need the parentheses right there. Okay, and now we still got a problem. Does not appear to have a pattern in it. Okay, so modules ninja.urls does not appear to have any patterns in it. Okay, so we've got a URL pattern right here, right? So that looks okay, but we've missed an S, of course. And there we go. So that port is already in use, which is not very handy. So I think I've got maybe some other applications running. So let's just try that again. There we go. Okay, so a few issues. Hopefully you've managed to resolve them. I just followed what it said in the text here. So I missed an S here on the URLs, and I needed the parentheses here. Okay, so with that in place, let's go ahead to see if this works. So if you remember, we need to make sure we go to the root URL. And then if you remember, we set up a URL with Ninja and then / and then we then set hello. And there we go. So we then receive the output or the return, which is just hello world. So we now have just quickly set up Django Ninja. So now we've got those basics in place. All we need to do now is create our 3 endpoints. So it's going to get harder as we go along. So this is going to be a simple get request from a database. This is going to be a request with a parameter, and then this is going to require us to build lots of different aspects to collect all the data from the different components in our database. So let's get started by just grabbing everything from the category table. So now we need to understand the basics of schemas. So Django Ninja allows us to define a schema, and we can use a schema for both responses and for validation. So the point is here that we're going to define what data is because we're dealing with GET requests. We need to define what data we want to actually respond with. So what data we want to send back to the user. So Django Ninja is nicely tied in to the Django ORM and the Django database tools, which allows us to easily build schemas, data patterns here, where we can describe what data we want to return back to the user. So that's why we're going to build this schema. We're going to define what it is we want to return back to the user when they make or when they send a request to one of our endpoints. So we've already set up a file here called schema. So we're good to go there. So we're going to need to bring that schema in a second, but let's just go ahead and build a really simple schema, if you like. So we need a category schema. So this is going to be a class. We're going to be using model schema here. Now, this is just a much more defined way. It gives us a little bit more granular control over what data we want to actually collect. But this is actually going to generate a smaller kind of schema or a simpler schema by utilizing model schema. That probably doesn't make sense. I was going to re-record that, but we're just going to go with this and we're going to see what this is. So this is model schema. Okay, so the point I was making here was we can build a schema as simple as this here. You can see we have a class. We're going to bring in from Ninja schema, and we can just define the data, that's the field, sorry, and the type of data. That's one way of doing it, but there's a little bit more advanced way of doing that. We can utilize something called model schema, and you can see that by utilizing this, it gives us a little bit more control of what it is that we want to return to the user and what data we want to return or validate. And you can see that this will create a schema like we saw before, the schema. So this just gives us a little bit more control by utilizing model schema as to what data we want to return and some of the other configuration settings. So this is why we're using model schema. So I've just simplified it there. There is a little bit more to it than that, but I think that's pretty much all we need to understand at this point. So let's go for the configuration of this, config. And then we're going to define what model we want to use, category, and then we need to just define the model fields. I think it is model fields equals, and then we got the name, and I think we want to return the slug. So these are the fields in the category table. Now we do have the category table, so we're going to need to bring that in. We've referred to it, so we're going to need to bring that in. So inventory dot models import category. Okay, so that's the category table sorted. So now what we can do is go back to the API, and I'm not so sure why that's not doing that, but we'll see in a shortly. So what we need to do now then is just bring that all into our API. So let's go ahead now and say from.schema, let's import the category schema. Okay, so that's the category schema brought in. So what we can now do is go ahead and create another endpoint. I'm just going to get rid of this one. So this is now going to be slash. So we just need to come up with a pattern now. I'm just going to follow the same pattern I used for the API in Django DRF. So inventory category, then all. So that's the endpoint. We need to define the response. So response equals. So we're now going to refer that to our schema. That's our category. So here, essentially, we're just defining what data we want to return, and then we're pointing it to our schema, and that's defining what data we want to return. Okay, so that's our category schema sorted out. Let me just do that. You can see the whole thing. And once we've got that in place, we now need just to create our function and actually grab the data from the database. So we're going to say category list. We're taking request, and then we're going to say the query set equals, and that's going to be category. So we're going to now grab the data from the database in the normal Django way, and then we're going to say return QS. So what's happening here is basically just going to tie that data up with the category schema. It's then going to filter out all the data that's not needed to be sent back to the user, and that's going to be defined obviously in the category schema, what data I want to send back, the name and the slug, and then that gets returned to the user. So hopefully, I'm hoping, it looks like we've got an issue here, but that is what we need to do. Okay, so we need to bring in model schema. This is why we're having a problem here. So from Ninja, let's import model schema. Okay, so let's just see if that works. Looks like we've still got a problem here. List has not been defined. Okay, so because we're using list here, we're just defining the data format, and we're going to need to bring in list as well. So from type in import list, or list, capital please. Yep, there we go. So that should now work okay. So if we now go to this endpoint, it should grab all the data from a database, all the categories, and return them. So let's take a look, shall we? So let's go back here, and Ninja. So it's always going to start with Ninja, inventory, category, all, and it looks like we've got a problem. So name category is not defined. Okay, so I thought there was a problem with this, because it wasn't automatically coming up. So let's take a look at what the problem is. So back in my API here, I haven't actually imported the database schema model. So ecommerce dot inventory dot models. Let's import category. There we go. Okay, so I brought in the category model so that we can run this query. So let's see if that now works. And there we go. So that's all the categories that are currently in the database. Right, so next up then, we need to build an endpoint that will take in a parameter. So product by category. So we're going to define what category we want to then show all the products that are associated to. So let's go ahead and have a look. Right, so this time then we're going to create a new endpoint. We'll do this first at api.get, and then we'll just define some sort of endpoint that we're going to utilize for this. So again, we're just going to follow, I think, what we set up in the Django DRF. So I think that was inventory slash and then products or products slash category. Yeah. Okay. So this time we need to take in a parameter. So let's go ahead and call this category slug. So that's pretty much how we're going to do that. So we're going to say someone's going to type a category name here, and we're going to capture that, and then we're going to utilize that as part of a query. And it's exactly the same. If you've seen the previous tutorial, it's exactly the same query now, except for we're just changing where it said query to category slug. So we're going to call this category list, and then we'll take in request as per normal, and then we're going to say category slug. So we're going to pass in this value that's been captured from the URL that the user's typed in, or it's been generated. We're going to say that's a string, and then we just need to run our query. So this is going to be product.objects.filter. So just a simple filter. You can obviously use all the normal Django tools at this point because we're just running a normal Django query, if you like. So slug. So we're traversing, because remember we're inside the product table here. So we're traversing that table. So there's a field called category in the products table. We're saying go and follow that foreign key over to the category table. And then inside the category table, there's a slug field. So we want to match whatever someone's typed into that there. And then anything associated to that slug inside the product table will then, so anything associated to that category in the category table, the product will show. So any product that's associated with this category will then be shown to the user. Apologies if I've made that confusing. Right, so where are we? There, and now we just say return. So what we obviously need to do now is bring in the product table. That's pretty much done. So let's go ahead and bring in the product table. And then we need to go back to our schema and make a new schema for this. So we're going to call that the product schema. Take in the model schema again. And this time we'll say class config. And then we'll say model equals product. So we're going to need to bring in that product table model. And then this time then, we're going to need to set up two things. Model fields equals, and then we've got the name. So you can, I'm just going to have the name and the web ID here. That's all I'm going to return. We could also return the category name, but we're not going to do it at this point. So we're going to need a colon there. And I think we're done. That's pretty much it. So we're going to run that query. We're going to find all the products associated to the category that's been defined and then return it. Return the products that are associated to it. Right, let's go back into here. let's go ahead and see if we can do this. I can't actually remember the endpoint now. So inventory products category, inventory products category, and I've got one already set up here. So fitness, sport and fitness, and it's not working. Okay, so result, blah, blah, QS product, object filter category slug, name category underscore slug is not defined. Right, let's go back in here then. So what we've got. Okay. Oh, I see why. Apologies. So what we've done here is that I've not finished this off yet because I was chatting. I've not finished this off yet. So this query at the moment, we're saying traverse the product table via the category field to the category table and then look for the slug. So obviously at this point, I need to say that that must equal category slug. The item, the category that's been passed into the URL needs to be then part of this query. So we can then run that query. And now when we refresh, we now have another problem. Okay, so object of type query set is not JSON serializable. Okay, so there's obviously an issue here. So this type of problem here, it says not serializable. This is telling me that there's a problem with the serializer, i.e. the schema. So why is that? Well, if you look here, just look at the pattern of this. We've got the get API, we then have the URL, but look what's missing, the response. So here, this type of problem, I'm kind of leading towards that idea of that the schema is an issue. So I'm just checking all the places where the schema should be placed, and obviously I've not actually brought the schema in yet. So let's go ahead and bring that in. Okay, and then I can now use the product schema that we made earlier. It's a product schema, yep. So let's now give it a go. Now you can see that response, there's an error there, so we need a comma. And then hopefully now when we refresh, we're good to go. So that now produces all of the products that are associated to the sport and fitness category. So now we need to do a little bit of work because that was really the easy bit. Now we need to do the same thing. We need to pass in a parameter. So to get the single product, I'm going to pass over the web ID and then find all the inventory items based upon the web ID in this case. We'll have a look at the table in a second. But we also want to include all the attributes, the brand, the type of product. We're going to include everything in the result here. So we need to really kind of build a few different schemas here and connect them up, similar to what we've done with the Django DRF. If you followed that, we need to connect all of the schemas up so that we produce all the information that's needed. So here then we've got this web ID, which is a unique ID related to this product. So the idea here is that I want to grab all of the individual sub items related to that product via this web ID. So that's ultimately what I'm trying to grab. Again, just to explain that again, imagine we had one product called a Nike shoe. That Nike shoe had multiple colors and sizes. All of those individual sizes and colors, every individual product has an individual field here, row. So it means that there might be 4 inventory items related to one product, and that's all the different colors or the different sizes related to that product. So when I capture one product, when I show one product to a user, I'm actually going to collect all the data about all the different types of that product that are available and put that onto the page. And of course, my front end would deal with all that logic, only show one item, but make all those other products available on that page via a click, maybe the color. So when the user clicks the different color of the shoe, it then goes to that information. Hopefully that makes it understandable. Hope you understand what's going on there. But like I said, what we need to do now is connect this table to all this other data here, bring it all in so that we've got some foreign keys. We've got a reverse foreign key here. We've got some many-to-many tables here. So we now need to produce and create lots of different schemas to connect all of this up. Okay, so let's go ahead and do exactly that. So we'll start off with the easy bit, which is building the endpoint here. So this time we're going to say /inventory slash, and then we're going to pass in the web ID. So we can call it whatever you like, but it just makes it easy to understand, right? It's the web ID. And then we want to connect this to our new data type list. We want to connect this to our new schema that we're going to build called inventory schema. We've not built this yet. Happy days. And we don't need that. And then we're going to create a new function called what we're going to call this. We're going to make a function then called, it's not going to be called that, inventory. We call this inventory list. How about that? Take in the request, web ID, and then that's going to be a string. Okay, so that passes that in. So now what we have then is a query, really simple query, equals product inventory. So we're going to be looking on the inventory table.objects.filter. We obviously want to run a filter here. So there's a Django filter. So we want to run that on the product. So inside the product inventory table, there's a field called product. That takes us via a foreign key over to the product table. And what we want to do is we want to make a match to the web ID field. So the web ID that's selected or typed in here, that needs to be matched against all the items associated to that in the product inventory table. Okay, and then we're just going to return QS. Okay, so that's the front end done. So now we just need to concentrate on the schema. So our schema is called inventory schema. So let's just bring that in. Happy days. And let's go over to our schema here. Right, so let's get going. So we're going to build quite a few different schemas here. So let's just start with the main schema called inventory schema. Yep. And then model, capital model. Yep. Okay, so we've got our model schema here. And now we need to define our class config. We'll do this step by step. Config. And then we're going to say model equals product inventory. And then we also then want model fields. So here we need to define a load of fields. So let's just start off with the ID. And then let's also bring in, for example, the SKU. So these are just all fields inside of the product inventory table. I always spell fields wrong. So product inventory, let's bring in the product inventory table. Okay, right, so in addition to that, I'm just going to, I've got black installed, which is a Python code formatter. So I'm just going to set up the VS Code settings. So it will automatically configure or style, format. That's the word I'm thinking of. Format my code. So this is just a Visual Studio Code setting override. So inside of here, I've got a file that I just save and I drop in. So basically, every time I save a file, it's going to run black, which is a formatting plugin. If you look at the requirements here, black's already installed. I've defined, for example, the line length. You can change that to whatever you like, 79 maybe. So it's just basically going to format my code nicely. So we can see this in action. Now I've set this up. You don't need to do anything else because black is already installed here. Just have a look at the PyPy instance of this and see what it does if that's something you want to utilize. So for example, here, if I press save now, you can see that something's changed because it's basically formatted my code nicely for me. The same thing here when I press save. You can see that it arranges everything in a nice way, following PEP 8 or trying to follow the PEP 8 Python style guidelines. So that's my code formatted nicely for me. Right, so with that in place, let's go back down to here. So this is now inventory setup. It's already set. So let's go back to the browser. Let's give this a refresh. So inventory, and then we need some sort of web ID. Okay, so if you go into the demo fixtures, let's go over to the product inventory. You can see that we can grab one of the product fixture. We can grab one of the IDs here. So just grab the first one, web ID. So let's go back over here in inventory, web ID, and we've seen to have an error. So name product inventory is not defined. So that's, it looks like here in our query, it can't find product inventory. So maybe we've just got a naming issue. Just close that. So that's in my API. So product inventory. Okay, doesn't like that. So let's just make sure that we haven't added it to our list here of models. So that's product inventory added. So hopefully at this point, apologies, hopefully at this point that should, there we go. So now we've grabbed that item. So notice here that there are 1, 2, 3, there are 4 items. So this one product has 4 items associated to it, or 4 sub items. So that could be, for example, the shoe in red, the shoe in green, the shoe in pink, and the shoe in white. That could just be that. So this is all the information from the inventory product table about one product based upon the web ID. Okay, so if we have a look at the model here, we want to grab a load of this data. In addition to that, we want to grab the brand, the product type, and then all the attributes, and then also the images. So let's go ahead and figure this out. So it's all about the schema at this point. I can just drop this down here. So just thinking about what we're going to need here, I'm just going to copy and paste some stuff into here. Just basically what I can do is I can go over to DRF here and have a look at the serializers, go down to the bottom here, and you can see this is basically all the fields that I'm trying to capture. I'm pretty much doing exactly the same thing as I did with Django DRF, but here with Django Ninja. So I've just copied some of that in to my schema here. Okay, so all that data, so I can test that straight away, of course. Let's give that a go. There we go, so that works okay. So now I need to extend this. So I need to add some more things. So the first thing I want to add in is the brand. So what I need to do here is up here is declare, define brand. So brand, and then I can basically just refer that to a schema that I need to make. So I now say class brand brand schema, model schema, and then I just need to go through the motions again. So let's just grab that. So this is going to be brand. The model fields, I think it's just name in brand. Don't think there's anything else I need to grab. So there we go. So I've now associated a new field here in this schema here, and I've associated that to my other schema here, which is the brand, and that's going to grab the name. So that gives me a little bit of control. I could just put the brand here because it is a foreign key from the product inventory table. It will just grab the default information and show whatever the dunder string return is of the table, but just gives me a little bit more control by doing that. So let's go back here and refresh, and that's broken. Okay, so what I'm going to need to do now is probably finish off this by bringing in the brand. So I need to bring that model in. Let's not forget that. I can't find it. And here we go. So if I were to inspect this, probably gives me a better view if I go to source. So you can now see I'm also now returning the brand. This is Safari. So you have a similar feature on Chrome. So you can see I'm also now bringing the brand name. So that gives me a better view of what's happening. Okay, so next up then, I'm going to need to bring in, for example, the product information. I want the product name, for example. So let's just go ahead and do that. So this is going to be another foreign key, really simple. This has already been set up, so that won't take long. So product schema, let's just refresh. I was expecting that just to work. What's going wrong here? arbitrary type allowed in config. What's about the right product? Schema. I think I have. So let's just restart this. Wouldn't think that would be a problem. There we go. So I just need to restart. So now I now have all the product information. Okay, so that's the product information. It gets a little bit tricky with the media. There's a few things that we need to deal with here because of the different fields we have in the media. If you remember in the media model, or if you've used images before, typically that's managed by, or we need to install Pillow to manage or to configure images in our model. So that uses a URL field, which is from Pillow. So we just need to create some different configurations for media. So let's just go ahead and build our media class first. So let's say class media schema. I don't know what's happened to this. I did have this set up so it would show or produce code snippets. I've been playing around with it. So media model model fields, go. So we've got the image URL field, and then I think we've got the alt text. Yeah. Okay, so those are the two fields. Now this image URL field is one of those Pillow fields. So we need to just define the fact that this is going to return. So the image URL field is going to be a string. So up here we can configure the data type that's going to be returned. We can create a lot of different configurations here, but basically I've just specified that this field, and made an override if you like, will return a string. So that's what's going to be needed in order for you to work with the Pillow URL field. If you want a bit of clarification there, let's just go into the inventory models here. I think media is at the bottom here. You can see that we're utilizing in the image field an image field. So that's been implemented via Pillow. Right, so that's why we're doing that. I think that is in the Django Ninja documentation. That's how to deal with it, or at least one way to deal with it. So that's the media scheme. Let's bring in media, the table, the model, and now we can go to the bottom here and then just bring that in. So we're going to say the media, and right, so this time, now we need to remember here that if just looking at the schema here, we need to remember here that this is a many to one, a reverse foreign key. So in order to get data about this product or these products, I need to pass something to this media table to tell it which images to return. So that's what I need to do here. So that's something slightly different that needs to happen. So here we say media, and then we're going to say list, and then we're going to define the schema, media schema, and then I'm going to say that equals field. Don't know what it is with field. And then we're going to set an alias. So this alias is going to equal media. Okay, so that's the name with the foreign key. If you go back into the inventory model here, you can see that the related name is media. And that's what I'm referring to here in the field alias media. So essentially what's going to happen here is when I look for media, that's going to send basically a signal from here, if you like, and tell it what media I want to collect about that particular product. So this is basically a way of setting up a reverse foreign key. Okay, so with that in place, you can see that it doesn't know what field is. So we're gonna need to bring in field here, and that's from Ninja. Yep. Okay, so that should, oh, list is not defined as well, so we just need to bring that in. So from type in import list. Yeah. Okay, so with that in place, we can now go back down here, and I think we're done here. So it looks like it's all up and running. So let's go back to our page and then refresh. and we should now have media. And there we go. So you can see that this is empty here, this media, because there isn't any data entry for that. That's why I think that's not being generated. So we have media. So in addition to this, if we go back to here, our schema, we've got product type. You can see that there's a foreign key here, so we can go ahead and just finish that one up. So we'll create a class again for this. This is going to be called product type schema. Model schema. Yep. And then we just go ahead and go through the motions again. Class config. It's going to be the product type, and then we get the model fields. That's going to be whatever that is. I think it's just name. We're just going to return the name, and then we need to bring in product type up here. So that's the model. So that's all now connected. We just need to now make an entry here in the inventory system. So this is just going to be, well, it's just product type. That's the name of the field in the inventory table with the foreign key to product type. So we just need to now connect that to the product type schema. Okay, so that's that. So the last thing then is attributes. Okay, so here we have a many-to-many. So what we want to do is grab all the attributes associated to the inventory product. So how this is set up, imagine we've got a shoe, a Nike shoe. There might be 4 different versions, different colors, etc. So those attributes, color, size, shape, whatever, they're all stored over here. So the idea is in this product attribute, have the name shoe size. Okay, so that's the product attribute. That could be associated to anything. And then down here in the product attribute value, we'll say we've got a foreign key over to this, and then we add an attribute value. So up here will be a name shoe size. Here will be stored shoe size attribute value will be 10 or shoe size 11. So there'll be multiple versions connected to that. So this is why we have I think that's the wrong way around. Oh no, so many to one. So one attribute would have many different types. So shoe size would have shoe size 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. So that's stored in there. So the idea of this link table here is it basically stores the product ID, ID1, and then the attribute. So the idea is that one product can have multiple attributes. So ID1 could be connected to product attribute value 1, which might be shoe size 10. It could then be connected to attribute 2, which is color. So we may have a product attribute called shoe color. So here we have shoe color red, and it can be associated. So I want to basically now collect all the data about that, all the attributes about different products. Right, so here we've got a many-to-many link. So we need to take that into consideration, and let's give this a go. Right, so the first thing then, we need to build a product list attribute value schema, I think. So let's go ahead and do that. Product. So we're going to build a product attribute value schema. And then class config, and then model equals product attribute. This is the product attribute value table. So that's the table that we're dealing with. That's going to store all the attributes, all the values and attributes about a product. Okay, so that's this table right here. So we're now going to build a link to that, to this table. Or we're going to be able to grab the values from here, in fact. Okay, right, so with that in place, this one here, let's just finish this off. So nothing crazy here, let's just go for all and just show you that you can use all. So fields equals, and we can just say all, save you having to type everything out. That might be more useful to you. So that's going to produce everything there. So now we need to make the link, right? So this is a many-to-many. So we're going to say attributes list, and then we're going to link it to our product attribute value schema. Okay, and that then is going to equal field. So we're going to do the same thing we did earlier, field, and then we're going to create an alias. Equals. So this alias is going to be called attribute underscore values. So where does that come from, this idea of attribute values? So let's go into the inventory model here, and then we're going to find this. So you can see here that attribute values is the name of a field in the product inventory table. So this is the name of the many-to-many field entry. It's not an actual field, is it? So this is the name of the reference to the many-to-many table. So attribute value. It goes through the product attribute values with an S table. That's the link table we've created here in the middle. So that's basically just a reference to that, so then we can grab that information. So that then sets up the attributes and grabs all the attributes then from the attribute values table here. So that should theoretically now be everything that we need. So let's just give this a go. We're going to restart this. It looks like there was a problem there. So let's go ahead and give this a go. And here we go. So we've got the attributes right here. So we've got ID 1, product attribute 1, attribute value 5. So that's shoe size, attribute value 2, attribute value red. And that's going to be the shoe color. Okay, so that gives you a general overview then of how to work with Django Ninja to perform the same thing that we did with, at this point at least, with Django DRF. So we do have documentation built in. So let's have a quick look at that with Django Ninja. If we go over to our Ninja main directory and say docs, docs even, that should take us then to the automated documentation that's generated. And you can see that's given us all the endpoints that are available. And then in addition to that, it's telling us about the schema and what's kind of expected or will be returned from the schema. So it gives us some useful information which might be useful for development, particularly if we're building the front end. We know now exactly what requests we can make. We send a GET request to this endpoint, and then this is what we're going to eventually probably be returned. And obviously that's useful for a front end developer because they now know what data needs to be handled on the front end. Okay, so that's a little bit about that. So that's how to grab that. So your main root directory and then the word docs. For just one more time, I will say in the previous tutorial, we went through the process of setting up a testing framework here. We installed PyTest, and then we went through and created some fixtures, and then we created some tests, both for the models and then for the Django DRF endpoints. Now, when we're using Django DRF, we found that the tests, or Django DRF comes with the API client, and that was a way of then simulating a client, a user accessing the endpoint, gathering the data from our API and so on. So that allowed us to test the endpoint. Now here, utilizing Django Ninja, we don't necessarily have access to the API endpoint. So just as a note, really, not to go through the whole process here, just to give you an indication of how you might want to start testing with Django Ninja. Now, PyTest is already set up here, so I do apologize. I'm not going to go through that process. By all means, go to the previous tutorial, go through that, and that will give you a better grounding moving forward from here. But let's just go ahead. For those who have and would like to maybe an idea of starting to test at least, and we can create a new folder in our API, our Django Ninja folder. So let's call this tests. And as per normal, we created, because we're going to create files with the same name, we went ahead and created the init file, and that allows us now to create the same name files. And then if we look at the previous tests here, we could probably just copy them actually from DRF, to be honest. We had, where are we? DRF tests. Here we had a test category and a test product. So let's go ahead and just copy test category up until Ninja tests. So we now have test category here. So previously then we brought in the API client, which was part of the Django DRF setup, and then we had our fixture. So we can just remove API client, because what we can now do is we can utilize, for example, in Django we have just client. So let's go back into the tests here. So here we made a simple fixture where we created a client and utilized it over test. So let's just copy that and we just rename that to client. We'll just call it, let's just call it client. I'm going to call this a C client. So for no particular reason. So let's go ahead now, and inside of here we're going to create this fixture. We don't need to bring that in at all, but we're going to need from the Django test, Django.test even, let's start doing it properly, Django.test, we'll need to import client. Okay, so we're going to use the client. So instead of the API client from Django DRF, we're just going to bring in client. So we're going to say here, API client, let's return let's return client. Simple as that. So with that in place, we can now go ahead and, for example, let's go back into our, let's just close all this. So because we need to make that available throughout the whole testing, we're going to go now and access the comp test file. So in here, we just need to go into test and then just look for C client. That's the client. So we're going to make that available throughout the whole test. So that fixture will now be available. PyTest will look for this file here and then load it up before we load the tests. So that now is available, the API client. And now we go back into the Ecommerce Ninja tests, go to test category here. So we're now going to kind of import that in. So let's go ahead and do exactly that. So we're just basically just going to call, we don't need to. So yeah, we'll bring that in. Apologies. So this is going to be C client. I think we've called it. Let's just double check that. So if I go back into tests here and C client, and this is called API client. So we need to rename that. Let's call that C client. Let's go back here. So we're going to bring in C client from our fixture. And now we can say we don't need, we can keep the endpoint for now. So we need to change this endpoint to Ninja. So that was our endpoint for all categories. Now response equals, so this is going to be C client.get and then the endpoint. And then we can go ahead and assert response.status code to 100. So let's just give that a go, see if that works. So let's just run PyTest. A no module named ecommerce.test. So no module named ecommerce.test. Ecommerce test.c. So error importing plugin. Okay. C client. So let's go back into test here. So ecommerce test, our tests. I've got the S there. So let's go back. I made a complete hash of this. I do apologize. Hopefully you get the general idea of what's going on. So that's worked. So to summarize for you, what I've done here is we can't use the API client from Django DRF. So we've set up something called C client, which is the Django test client. That's going to allow us to simulate sending requests to our API. So we bring that in and we just make that available as a PyTest fixture so it can be utilized throughout the testing. And then we load that up before the test run utilizing conf test file here. So this is all loaded up and you can see we pointed it to that file that we've just made. So we did that and then we went ahead and we've gone into our Ninja folder, made a new folder called tests. We've made a new file here called test_category. Don't forget that's the same name as another test. So we've used an init file here to allow us to use multiple names, the similar names, have multiple files with similar names. That's it. And then I've gone ahead and we created our test and we've just manipulated this slightly. So we've gone ahead and we're utilizing a C client here. We're bringing this in. We've made an endpoint, and then we're just testing here to make sure that the endpoint works by utilizing the status code. And so we run that again, and you can see everything passed. Everything is okay. So the endpoint works okay. So we can access the data. So I did remove that line. So the response, we can access the data.content. If you go over to the documentation, the Django documentation, you can run through this now. Django provides a small set of tools. One's called the test client. That's essentially what we're using here. And this gives you much more information about how to utilize the test client. I just wanted to introduce the idea of it. I'm not going to go through this in full. Apologies. I was just thinking on my feet here. It's just an added bonus I thought I'd bring in. So with that in place, we can now go ahead and perform the same type of action on the, if we go into DRF again, we made some tests for the product endpoints. So let's just go ahead back into our tests here in Ninja. So we can then kind of perform the same types of tests again. So we just need to change some of this. So let's do test get product by category. Okay, so we're going to need the C client here. Let's just see if we can get this working. C client, single product fixture. And then we've got an endpoint here, which is going to be called Ninja category. And then we get the response. And then we won't do expected this time. We'll just get rid of that. And we won't do that. But let's just do response codes. So I'm just going to get rid of that. Let's run PyTest again. No module named Ecommerce dninja.test.utils. Okay, so we had a utility file that we were using. So we can just get rid of that for now because we're not using it. Name error API client. So that's because I need to change it right here. And there we go. So we will now have now a pass test. So we just tested this endpoint here and we passed in the name of the category. So we can go ahead and do that with the final one. I'll let you have a little bit of fun there. And maybe we can come back to this. This wasn't going to be a feature, apologies, of this tutorial, but I just wanted to show you that there was going to be a difference if you wanted to move on and do a little bit of testing. Thank you very much for listening. Apologies for that end part, if that was a little bit long-winded or unnecessary. Hopefully you got the general idea now of utilizing Django Ninja. So I do hope that serves as a good introduction to Django Ninja. I suppose this isn't really an introduction for beginners in many different ways, but hopefully if you are a beginner, there was enough information at the start to give you that start that you needed. It did kind of need you to understand a lot of different things here, which maybe you needed to see the previous tutorial and have some other understanding, setting up Docker and all those other aspects. That I don't think those, in my opinion, are kind of beginner steps that I've demonstrated in that much detail. So again, if you have struggled through this, I do apologize, but hopefully there was some value there for you, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial.